Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking to you about the current status of negotiations with the Long Island Railroad. Make sure it's clear where we currently stand. It's important that our public understand where we stand and answer any questions you may have with respect to that. To begin with, I think it's an understatement to say that we fully understand the impact that a strike would cause for our customers, the elected officials, constituents, and all the residents of Long Island and the New York metropolitan area. It's an extremely impactful event which would disrupt people's lives and cause a great deal of discomfort. And we have focused a considerable amount of effort at trying to avoid that, and we will continue to do so. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a position where we need to find a way to go forward and do just that. I went down to Congress last Wednesday and made sure it was clear that Congress was not going to intervene, asked them the question whether they would intervene and bring resolution to a strike if we were at an impasse, and we got a crystal clear answer from them that they would not. I also made a commitment to them that I would enter into the negotiations, so when I came back the next day, there was a negotiation session scheduled. You heard about that. Lasted quite a few hours, a little over 5 hours, and there was an exchange of information. Was it extremely important from my standpoint is that the offer that the MTA had on the table was clear, it was understood, and any concerns that the Long Island Railroad Labor Coalition might have with respect to it could be raised to me and I could answer it. It would also give me an opportunity to be able to explain and ask them questions about any concerns that they may have. And from that standpoint, it was a very good discussion and dialogue. But early on in the discussion, it became apparent that there was a gap. And in that discussion, the international representative, the representative from the International Labor Union, said it was more like a gulf, a much bigger gap. And I agreed with it. But we extended the discussion with respect to what our offer was on the table and what the union's counteroffer was. And it became apparent in that discussion that it was truly a gulf. We have moved 3 times over a period of many months. We started with 3 zeros. We went to a point of offering the TW pattern deal of approximately 12%. And then we moved toward, after the second PEB, responding to what the union's primary concerns were, which were a 17% pay raise over 6 years, and we're providing it actually a little over 18% over 7 years, and then for the first time ever, Long Island Railroad employees paying for some of their health care costs. And the way we were going to fund it, because we must be able to do this in a fiscally responsible manner for the long term, was to go to where we have traditionally gone with the labor unions, which is looking for ways for prospective new hires, employees who are not even here yet, to ask them to contribute more. It's a pattern we have used with the unions in the past. They have with these same labor unions, as well as across the bargaining front in total. We have seen people do that in other collective bargaining agreements. So we said, okay, we're going to give you these 17% wage increases, extended by a year. But by far the largest wage increases that any group of represented employees are seeing right here in the New York metropolitan area. And we're going to do it in a way for what is already the highest paid labor force in the United States in terms of commuter rail groups with an excellent pension. We got past that. We're looking for a way to fund it. And what became clear in their counteroffer was they really weren't willing to go to those prospective new employees. What they offered was 15/100ths of a percentage point. There's no way, no basis to be able to fund that. That is the gulf we have. If we were to accept this deal on their terms, it would put additional pressure on both the fare increases that we have projected in the financial plan and pressure on funding of the capital program, both of which are exceptionally important to the MTA. We have to self-fund a large part of our program, the largest capital program of a transit agency in the United States. And we also are very cognizant of the fact that we have to have reasonable controls on fare increases. And we need help from labor to help fund a portion, just a portion, more than what they had in their counteroffer, and we can't seem to find a way. I sometimes get a feel that there's undue influence by the international labor unions. Maybe they want to make sure that we cut a deal here that sets a pattern for the rest of the country. And if that's what they want to do, fine. But the people who are responsible for running the system here, which is the MTA, and representing its employees, which are the unions, need to come to terms with that deal, unencumbered by outside forces who have other interests. That is a very important point. We need to get to a different place, and we need to find a way to be able to do so in a way that is fiscally responsible. To say that I'm extremely disheartened and disappointed that we're deviating from a tried and true and way that we have traditionally been able to fund labor increases for employees is an understatement. And if that's something they feel they can't do, well, let's find other ways to do it. But we've gone to the capital program, we've gone to other future retiree benefit costs as far as we can go. So that's where we stand today. And like I said, we need to exhaust all means to be able to find a way to resolve this, because the strike is untenable. I'd be glad to take any questions.
The unions today said today that the strike would commence Sunday at 12:01 a.m. If that's the case, when do you need to begin drawing down service? When will riders start to feel the impact?
The first point of time of self-help, or the union's right to strike, is 12:01 Sunday morning. So there's some point in time in advance of that where the railroad needs to be effectively closed down. I don't know the exact time.
But what's a framework of when people making plans now for their weekend should expect that this might impact them?
Well, certainly if they're going to go out and come back somewhere over the weekend, it will affect them. If they travel on a Thursday or Friday, not, but we will publish that date when it becomes closer and near and obvious that we're going to have a strike.
Tom, as much as I enjoy talking to you and to the union too, why are you having this meeting with us here now? Why are you having a media press conference? Why aren't you in the room with them?
Well, first of all, the negotiations were suspended for today, both parties' parts. There is a big gulf. So we could talk at each other all day long until there's substantive movement. We've moved 3 times, and I've heard statements from the union that we're vacillating, we keep changing our story. In the spirit of negotiations, it's give and take. We've done giving, they've done taking. But they haven't moved at all, slightly, very smallly from their position. Until they're ready to move, there's no reason to have negotiations. Alfonso.
Tom, you had said that the offer that is on the table was not a take it or leave it offer. So why not a counter offer today?
Because their counter offer in and of itself is technically a counter offer, but it's 15/100ths of a percentage point. We're not going to negotiate against ourselves. And we're not asking them to fund the whole difference that needs to be funded, just a portion of it. You can't have the negotiations when one party is willing to discuss and the other party isn't.
Can you speak in layman's terms, this 51/100th of a percentage? What does that mean to you?
They're offering things that really don't accrue savings to us. From a standpoint of closing a labor deal, you have to pay for existing costs for back pay and then outgoing costs over a period of years. These are the highest paid employees in our system, certainly in the country. We're giving them the highest wage increase. We need to find a way to be able to fund it. And so what we had on the table was extending the period of the term from 6 to 7 years. We said new hires would pay 4% for their entire term of employment for pension contributions, and they would pay health care contributions for 4%. Certainly there's room to negotiate around those elements, but, you know, they've offered things that don't generate any savings.
If the union gets what they want, it almost sounds like then you might have to raise fares.
One of the issues of concern we have, the answer to your question is yes, is the long-term fundability of this. How can we afford it, long-term affordability? We could probably close the deal on the terms of the PEB and not necessarily affect immediately fares, but it will affect pay-as-you-go capital. That will be real. And then over time, as these costs continue to accrue and increase, we could probably, it's going to put pressure on the fare.
Gentleman in the back. Your contingency plan has been widely criticized by riders as not being enough for the 3 million commuters that are going to be impacted by this. They're saying not enough buses, not enough alternatives for them to get to work, and that, you know, staying at home, telecommuting just doesn't work for a lot of riders. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I think you meant 300,000, not 3 million. 300,000, okay? So that's customers. In some cases, that's 2 trips, 1 person. We've said from the start, you cannot replace the Long Island Railroad. You can't add additional lanes on the highway. You can't find enough buses. So there is no way we could come up with a contingency plan that would be able to accommodate all the capacity in the same time as the railroad has. And when I started off this press conference, I said that it would be painful, because it's knowing what pain it would cause. A strike is very painful, and it's a tool that's used to try to attract attention to an issue.
Tom, what if anything can be done now to prevent this? The unions are saying you're at an impasse. I mean, what in your mind can you tell the Long Islanders can be done? I mean, are you hoping that the governor would step in at this point?
We need a lot of people to step in and get us to a different place, but I think one is to get the union to move in terms of, if we're acknowledging that these highest paid employees in the industry are going to get the highest raise in the region, let's find a way to help us fund it. And we manage those resources, and we have to cover all those, not just the issue of funding this raise for these employees. So we need pressure to be brought on to get them to a different place, especially since they kind of surprised us in the sense that they didn't want to go to where we have traditionally gone, which is new employees yet to be hired, asking them to contribute more. At the end of the day, they'll have the same pension benefit, they'll have the same health care benefits, but they're going to be asked to pay a little bit more, which is what's being done in labor across the landscape.
Tom, I was just wondering if they're willing to do anything in terms of increased pension payments and health payments for the new employees. I mean, is there anything that they're willing to give at this point?
In their counteroffer, they offered something, but it's very, very small. It's for a limited term that they're willing to pay at a much lower percentage.
Somebody else have a question yet? You two?
Cut it out. Just on the last point, could you just be more specific on what they're actually offering that would...
We can provide it later, but it's basically one of the issues is they said they changed the time it takes for an employee to vest in a pension from 5 to 10 years. That's actually no cost savings, okay? It's issues of, there was a dialogue regarding we'll have employees pay more for pension costs, but at a lesser rate for instead of the entire term of employment for a fixed number of years. It doesn't generate the dollar values and the savings that we need to have. These have to be sustainable over the long term. Otherwise, the pressure on the fares comes back, and the further reduction in the capital program pay-as-you-go financing.
The unions have discussed, they say that they raised the possibility of pushing the strike to September, and that the MTA rebuffed that. Is that something that's being considered at this time, trying to push for a 2-month extension?
Well, pushing it to a later date, I'm not sure what it gets, okay? In some cases, I believe one of the union members got an election around that time frame. But one of the issues that I can tell you that I have is that, you know, we're in hurricane season. Hurricane season generally is June 1st through, I think, October 30th. But we've had hurricanes less than that. I think the worst case scenario we could find ourselves in is employees out on strike, may or may not come back to work. The Long Island Railroad is one of the best evacuation means off the island for people that need to get off. You can't put all the cars on the expressway. And I even think labor would not want to be in a position, labor and management, that would put the public at risk. So an extension to September doesn't get us. It has to be an extension beyond that. I personally, from an operational standpoint, am fully concerned with the issue of the impact of what we'd have to do in the event of a hurricane. She raised it.
When will you meet again?
We haven't scheduled a meeting again, but I'll come to the table when there's a chance that we can actually close a deal. I've made that commitment, and I made that commitment to the union today.
What do you think of Mayor de Blasio going out of town? He kind of downplayed the strike, said we could telecommute.
Well, to begin with, we're focused on what we need to provide. I'm not going to comment on the on the mayor's trip. I will tell you there's close coordination between the mayor's Office of Emergency Management and the Long Island Railroad and other affected emergency agencies in the area to make sure that we're fully aligned, and we've gotten full support from them.
I'm wondering if you can talk about how many New Yorkers, New York City residents, rely upon the Long Island Railroad. How many travel between Queens and Manhattan and Brooklyn?
The overwhelming majority of customers on the railroad are Nassau and Suffolk County. And I'll give you ratios. I don't know if I know numbers, but we can get you the numbers. Of the Long Island Railroad customers, it's almost 2-for-1 Nassau versus Suffolk. But a surprising number of people ride the Long Island Railroad from Brooklyn and Queens. I believe order of magnitude 20% or so. So it's a healthy number. It's not a small number.
Has there been discussion with the governor's office about these talks, the proceedings, and/or contingency?
The governor's office is kept informed. I make sure the governor's kept informed, and the chamber. And when it came to developing the contingency plan, we had an awful lot of support from other entities within the state of New York government. New York State Police, Department of Transportation, and other people who could provide resources, as well as the county executives of Nassau and Suffolk. So the development of the plan and its implementation would be a joint effort of all of those parties.
Next to Peter.
And what's the plan for ending the strike if a strike does happen?
Well, you have to get resolution. One of the parties decides to come back, or we get a deal, and then from a standpoint of if a strike occurs, the primary action the railroad takes is to secure the railroad, much like we do in a storm. We try to get all the equipment laid up and in a safe location. We secure the facilities so nobody can do acts of vandalism to them. And we run trains to keep the system running. On an electric railroad, we don't run trains anywhere near the same level of service that you run when you're carrying passengers, but electric trains like to be run and the track circuits like to be exercised, and so you keep the system in a ready state of being able to come back to service once the strike is over.
Anybody who hasn't had a question yet, please.
Tom, this dispute's been going on for 4 years now. I guess it's contracts for now. It went all the way to a presidential emergency board in December. You lost. You went to another presidential board. You lost again. This contract would be retroactive for 4 years. You almost immediately, or very soon, will have to start renegotiating another contract, the next contract going forward. Given all the risks that you outlined before, including the hurricanes and the inconvenience to people, isn't there at some point that the MTA says, you know, we lost and let's get ready to fight again in a year and a half?
Well, some people, not you necessarily, have short memory, but in 1994, the last time the Long Island Railroad struck, the Presidential Emergency Board recommendations were in management's favor. And the union decided at that time that they're not binding recommendations, it's not binding arbitration, and they decided to strike. So that's the nature of the Railway Labor Act. So it's not as if they're binding arbitration requirements, number one. Number two, while I understand the question and someone could say, yeah, let's get on it, once you cement in a labor agreement costs that cannot be provided for in the budget, they're unsustainable, you've created a major problem. I'm a chairman and CEO. I wear two hats. As the CEO, I lead the agencies and I make sure they're working together. But as chairman, I'm a board member. And the fiduciary responsibility of a board member is making sure that any and all of its decisions are based on sound fiduciary responsibility. To enter into an agreement for the sake of getting agreement and avoiding a strike that is not fiduciary responsible is something I won't do and a number of the other board members won't do.
One last one.
There's a video of the unions talking about a strike, but it appears that the people in the video are not from this area. Does that mean to you that people from other internationals, from other unions around the country, are trying to force the hand of the local unions because of their own political agenda? And how do you feel about that?
Well, I can't get into the minds of people and say what drives their decision, but certainly there is a lot of international influence in this. And internationals have other interests and other desires that don't necessarily align themselves with what we need to do here. Anthony Simon, Artie Meritera, the leaders of the unions here, will live with this issue, as will the MTA going forward. And it's important that they are unencumbered as they make these decisions. And so there's a rhetorical question out there: to what extent is international labor influencing this decision?
So would you say to them, pay attention to what's going on in your own backyard and don't worry about the global issues?
I think a number of people should say that and make it clear to them that the needs of New York take precedence over the needs of anybody outside of New York. We live with the consequences. We should make the decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.